911, what's the location of your emergency?
I need an officer to come to my house right away, please. I think my son took the gun. I don't know if it's him. I don't know what's going on. I'm really freaking out.
It was a freezing day in late November 2021. Snow covered the ground outside Oxford High School, the kind of cold that makes you pull your jacket a little tighter. Inside, students were moving through the halls, chattering, grabbing books, and trying to make it to their next class on time. Just a regular day, or so it seemed.
November 30th, 2021. 15-year-old Ethan Crumbley kills 4 fellow students and injures 7 other people at Oxford High School in Michigan.
Is it your own choice to plead guilty?
Yes, sir.
Ethan Crumbley, just 15 years old, was among the crowd, moving quietly through the hall. He didn't stand out, just another kid in the mix, wearing a gray hoodie, some jeans, and carrying a backpack like everyone else. His hair was a little messy, hanging over his eyes, and he slouched as he walked, like someone who didn't want to be noticed. If you passed him, you'd probably think he was just another kid having a normal day. Teachers never saw him as trouble. In fact, they barely noticed him at all. A quiet boy who didn't make much noise. But behind that quiet face, something dark was brewing. Around 12:50, Ethan made his way to the bathroom at the far end of the school, where it was a little more out of sight. He pushed open the door, walked into a stall, and set his backpack down on the floor. Now, this is where things start to change. Most kids have notebooks, pens, and maybe a snack or two in their bags, right? Ethan had those things too. He pulled out a black notebook, a couple of pens, and a juice bottle like it was nothing. But that wasn't all he was carrying. Deep inside his bag, under all the normal stuff, there was something else, something deadly. He reached down into the bottom of his backpack and pulled out a jet black Sig Sauer 9mm handgun. His fingers moved with a strange calm as he started loading it with bullets, one by one. The soft, clinking sound of metal hitting metal filled the empty bathroom. It was almost like the ticking of a clock, slow and steady, each click building up to something that no one could have imagined. Ethan wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicking. He loaded the gun like he had done it before, like he knew exactly what he was about to do. Then that last sound, click-clack. The gun was ready, cocked, and the final piece was in place. In the middle of all that, outside the bathroom, kids were still moving, laughing and talking. They had no idea that just a few feet away, something was about to go horribly wrong. So, after that chilling moment in the bathroom, Ethan stepped out. But this wasn't just something that happened out of the blue. He had been planning this for months. Every little detail had been on his mind. He had even Googled how long it would take the police to show up once the shots were fired. He knew the difference between types of ammo. He looked up whether .22 or 9mm would do more damage, and of course the 9mm was what he settled on. More destructive, more deadly. He even searched if Michigan still had the death penalty, trying to figure out the worst that could happen to him after all this. He wasn't just thinking about random people either. In his journal, he scribbled down something dark. The first victim has to be a pretty girl with a future, so she can suffer just like me. It was all planned. Ethan left the bathroom, leaving his backpack and notebook behind. He still had the gun with him, hidden in the front pocket of his hoodie, his hand gripping it tightly. Yet, on the outside, he looked completely calm, like nothing was out of the ordinary. The hallway was packed with students going about their day, unaware of the storm about to hit. And then, without warning, he yanked his hand out of his pocket. His right arm shot up, straight and rigid, pointing the gun directly at the crowd in front of him. In that moment, everything changed. He pulled the trigger, and the gunshots echoed through the hallway. In just 7 seconds, he had fired 7 shots, each one aimed with deadly intent. 2 students, Hannah St. Juliana, only 14 years old, and Madison Baldwin, 17, fell victim to those bullets. The peaceful hum of the school day shattered. Screams filled the air, kids panicking, running in every direction. You could hear the frantic squeaking of shoes on the linoleum floor, backpacks being dropped, and textbooks crashing to the ground. It was chaos, pure chaos. Some students tried to make it into classrooms, hoping to find safety. Others, out of sheer desperation, jumped out of the windows on the ground floor. Inside one of the classrooms, kids huddled behind desks, scared for their lives. Some were too frozen in fear to move. Others grabbed their phones, recording what was happening because they couldn't believe it was real. The sound of gunshots kept echoing in the background, and one girl, terrified and in shock, whispered into her phone's camera, "Please don't let this be real. Please don't let this be real." But it was real, and nothing was stopping it.
Sheriff's office! Yeah, we're here. Yeah, we're here. Yes! Sheriff's office. It's safe to come out. Now, we're not willing to take that risk right now. I can't hear you. We're not taking that risk right now. Okay, well, come to the door and look at my bag, bro.
No. Yeah, bro.
He said bro.
He said bro. Red flag.
Following the terrifying chaos in the hallway, panic spread rapidly. Oxford's assistant principal, Christy Gibson Marshall, stood in the hallway as kids rushed towards her. At first, she didn't think much of it. They were running, and she thought maybe they were just playing around. But then, as more students came pouring down the hall, she realized this wasn't fun and games. They were scared, really scared. Then, her boss's voice came over the PA system. "We're on lockdown. This is not a drill." That's when she knew something was horribly wrong. Now, she was supposed to follow protocol and stay put, but something deep inside her pushed forward. She found herself moving down the hallway, towards the noise, towards the smell of burnt gunpowder. The screams were getting louder, and so were the gunshots. She kept walking, and then, outside classroom 225, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. Tate Meyer, a 16-year-old student, was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. He had been shot twice. Then, a short distance away from him, she caught sight of Ethan. It didn't make sense to her. Why wasn't he running like the other students? He was just standing there, alone. She walked up to him and asked if he was okay. He was just standing there, calm. He didn't answer her, though. He just stared ahead and then started walking back down the hallway, like none of it mattered to him. A few minutes later, Ethan found himself in another bathroom. Inside were two boys, Keegan Gregory, 15, and Justin Schilling, 17. They didn't know each other, but when they heard the gunshots, they both did what any terrified kid would do. They tried to hide. Schilling, the other one, told Gregory to come into the stall with him. Gregory climbed up on the toilet, trying to make sure his feet wouldn't be seen. As they crouched there, Gregory texted his family, shaking with fear. His message was simple: "Help! Gunshots! I'm hiding in the bathroom." Schilling hid behind the stall door, hoping it would protect him, but Ethan wasn't far. Somehow, maybe from the sound of Gregory's texting, Ethan knew they were there. He kicked the stall door open. For a moment, he just stood there, hesitating, like he wasn't sure what to do next. Then he ordered Schilling to come out, but told Gregory to stay hidden. Both boys did as they were told. As Gregory started texting his family again, Ethan raised the gun and shot Schilling. It was quick and brutal. Greg's text to his family followed seconds later. He killed him, OMG. After that, Ethan turned back to Gregory. For a moment, it looked like it was his turn, but instead, Ethan told him to lean against the wall. Gregory didn't wait around to see what would happen next. He bolted, running past Ethan before he could react.
But there was no indication, unknown why he would have, he just made a hard right to that bathroom.
And then somebody fled the bathroom after Justin was killed.
Yeah. Keegan just came absolutely tearing out of that bathroom. I remember watching. He was running so fast. The cameras that recorded him all it was on the camera was a blur. He was moving so fast.
By around 1 p.m., Ethan walked out of the bathroom and started down the hall. He didn't get far before he spotted the police officers, who had finally arrived. At first, they ran right past him, probably focused on getting to the scene. But one officer noticed something wasn't right. Ethan was still holding the gun. The officers started shouting, telling him to get on his knees. For the first time, Ethan didn't resist. He raised his hands up in the air and followed their commands. It was over, just like that. So, after Ethan raised his hands and the police took him into custody, it became clear that this had all been part of his plan. He wasn't going to end things by killing himself. No, that wasn't part of the picture. He was too curious about what would happen next. In his journal, he wrote about it, saying he wanted to be the cause of the largest school shooting in Michigan. He had wanted America to hear his name and see what he had done. His goal was clear. He wanted to spend the rest of his life in prison.
As he wrote in his journal, he wanted to see the impact of his crime, which is why he did not take his own life. Again, this goes back to the defendant's extensive planning. He chose not to die on that day because he wanted the notoriety. The terror that he caused in the state of Michigan and in Oxford is a true act of terrorism.
Now, when you look at Ethan's parents, Jennifer and James Crumbley, there's a bigger story behind the scenes. Jennifer had grown up in Clarkston, a suburb of Detroit, and as a teenager, she spent her time skiing with the junior varsity team. She had a sharp personality, a mix of sarcasm and self-indulgence, and according to those who knew her, she could talk endlessly. James, on the other hand, was from Jacksonville, Florida. He was 2 years older than Jennifer, and people had mixed feelings about him. Some said he had a carefree, happy-go-lucky attitude, while others described him as more reserved, even a little distant. Like Jennifer, his past wasn't spotless either. He had his own DUI conviction back in 2005, the same year the couple got married on a beach in Florida. Ethan was born a year later, their only child. The family moved to Michigan while Ethan was still in elementary school. They settled into a modest 3-bedroom home filled with pets, dogs, cats, even a chinchilla. But there were signs early on that something wasn't quite right. They both have often had big arguments since Ethan was just 6 years old. Once, Jennifer and James went out bar hopping, leaving Ethan home alone without a phone. When the neighbor confronted her, Jennifer exploded in anger, shouting a storm of expletives. By the time 2021 rolled around, Ethan's behavior started to show more troubling signs. He was now a teenager, and it was clear something was off. His text messages, later revealed during the trial, showed that he was possibly suffering from hallucinations. In one message to his mom that March, he asked her to come home because he thought someone was inside the house. He said he heard something and initially thought it was her, but later realized it wasn't. He kept asking her when she would get back. In another message, he sent her a picture of what he called a demon, saying the house was haunted. When his mom didn't respond, Ethan kept pleading, asking her to at least send a message back.
Text messages show he told his mother he was seeing things in the spring of 2021. I got a picture of the demon. It is throwing bowls. Can you at least text back?
Jennifer was at the horse farm with James at the time, and she only called him back about an hour later, which lasted barely 19 seconds. By April, things seemed to get worse. Ethan's texts showed a boy sinking deeper into isolation and anxiety. He told a friend that he could hear people talking to him and saw figures in the distance. He even asked his dad to take him to a doctor. But instead of getting help, his dad just handed him some pills and told him to toughen up. When Ethan tried to talk to his mom about it, she laughed it off.
Ethan texted a friend saying he was having hallucinations and hearing voices, but his parents wouldn't help.
He says, I actually asked my dad to take to the doctor yesterday, but he just gave me some pills and told me to quote-unquote suck it up.
Yes, sir.
And then seeing my mom laughed when I told her.
Yes, sir.
But what was even more alarming was how Ethan's fascination with violence was growing. In the middle of April, he told his friend that he had this urge to take an axe and chop a baby bird in half. That dark desire wasn't just talk. A few weeks later, he did exactly what he said. Investigators later described 2 short videos where Ethan burned a baby bird with a butane lighter. He talked to it softly, like he was speaking to a child, calling it Little Buddy while he tortured it. Not long after that, about a month later, he texted his friend again. The message was brief but chilling. "I'm getting that feeling I need to kill again."
Journal entries about torturing baby birds and a video of Crumbley describing his desire to kill.
I understand my consequences. I understand that people put me in prison for this.
After that unsettling period in Ethan's life, where everything seemed to be spiraling, his obsession with guns grew even stronger. He was already familiar with firearms, and he'd even filmed himself handling a .22 caliber Kel-Tec pistol his parents had lying around the house. At one point, he even messaged a friend, writing something dark. Now it's time to shoot up the school. He followed it with several jokes, but it was clear there was nothing funny about it. Then, in late October 2021, things took another turn. His closest friend, the one he'd exchanged more than 20,000 messages with, was sent out of state for mental health treatment. This hit Ethan hard. It was like the last person he connected with was taken away. In the weeks that followed, Ethan buried himself online, spending hours looking up mass shootings and searching for answers to questions like, what is the worst prison sentence in Michigan? His mind was racing, and whatever darkness he was battling seemed to get worse. Ethan had already been dealing with a lot of loss. His dog had died, his grandmother had passed away, and now, with his friend gone, it was like he had no one left. That sense of isolation seemed to push him further into his dark thoughts. He wrote in his journal about it. He knew something was wrong. He felt his own evil taking over, but at the same time, he didn't want to be that way anymore. He wanted help. He felt stuck, like no one was listening. His parents didn't hear him, and he felt trapped in what he called a tiny loop of sadness. Yet, there was one thing Ethan's parents didn't pay attention to, his love for guns. They would take him to the shooting range regularly, almost like it was a bonding activity. Then, just days before the tragedy, on November 26th, James took Ethan to a gun shop in Oxford. He wanted to buy his son an early Christmas gift. There's footage from the CCTV showing the two of them walking up to the counter, not browsing much, like they knew exactly what they were looking for. And they did. They were there to buy a Sig Sauer pistol.
James Crumbley bought that gun that his son used to kill as a gift for his son 4 days before the attack. James Crumbley failed to secure that gun in a way to prevent his son from accessing it. The decision that James Crumbley made to buy that gun as a gift for his son was made even though he knew that his son was in the midst of total and complete social isolation and had been in a downward spiral of distress that had been going on for some time.
James paid $519.35 for the gun, using his credit card. Before they left, he even signed a form acknowledging that buying a firearm for a minor was illegal. But none of that stopped him. To him, this was just a gift for his son. So after everything that had been happening with Ethan, things took another turn on the morning of November 30th. At around 9:25 a.m., Jennifer Crumbley was on the phone with the front desk at Oxford High School. Ethan had been caught in class, not for the first time, but this time it was worse. He had been drawing disturbing images, guns, a bleeding figure, and writing phrases like, "The thoughts won't stop," "blood everywhere," and "my life is useless." The school staff was alarmed. On top of that, they had noticed that just the day before, Ethan had been caught looking up bullets on his phone during class.
I am concerned that he needs somebody to talk to for mental health support.
And did you tell either one of them when that should occur?
I said as soon as possible, today if possible.
As Jennifer spoke with the school, she quickly texted James a picture of the worksheet showing the drawings and writings. James responded with frustration, but Jennifer knew this was serious. They needed to go to the school immediately. By 10:37 a.m., both Jennifer and James arrived at the school. They were greeted by school counselor Sean Hopkins, who was waiting for them along with Ethan and the dean of students, Nick Ejak. They all sat down to talk about Ethan and the troubling signs he had been showing. This wasn't the first time Hopkins had been aware of Ethan's struggles. Back in May of that year, a teacher had emailed Hopkins, expressing concern that Ethan often fell asleep in class and was failing. Then, in September, another teacher reached out again, saying Ethan felt like his family was a mistake and that he was carrying a lot of emotional weight. The conversation this morning, though, felt different. Hopkins and the staff knew they had to do something about what they had seen. They went through the findings, but it was clear they didn't fully understand the depth of the problem. Even though schools in America have added protocols like metal detectors and police officers, much of the responsibility for preventing these kinds of situations has been left to counselors and teachers, people who weren't really trained as mental health professionals. At Oxford High, there was no real system in place to identify threats like Ethan's behavior. In fact, the school didn't have the right communication between staff members to catch someone on a dangerous path. They didn't know what signs to look for, and they didn't have a way to make sure that students who needed help actually got it. Also, the student didn't see Ethan as a real threat, even though his actions were clear red flags. The guidelines for spotting potential dangers just weren't followed, and because of that, no one knew what to report as suspicious. Instead of seeing Ethan's behavior as something dangerous, his actions were only reported to Hopkins. But Hopkins had been swarmed with other cases and didn't even get a chance to meet with Ethan during the first 2 reports. By the time he was told about Ethan's concerning behavior for the 3rd time, he finally decided to meet with him. It wasn't a long meeting. They just spoke briefly in a school hallway, and Hopkins mentioned that he was there for Ethan if he ever wanted to talk. That was it. That was the only intervention before the day took a tragic turn.
Because I care about my students, and I cared about him in that moment particularly because I thought it was a really rough situation to be showing signs of needing help, of needing support, and it felt like he got the opposite when I tried to get him that help and support.
So after that tense meeting with the Crumbleys, school counselor Hopkins made it clear that Ethan needed urgent psychiatric help. He gave them a list of therapy options, hoping they would take their son home and get him the support he so desperately needed. But things didn't go that way. The Crumbleys didn't seem concerned or alarmed. In fact, they appeared more annoyed by being called to the school. Jennifer even mentioned that taking Ethan home wasn't an option because they both had to get back to work. Hopkins, feeling stuck, had no choice. Without a valid reason to keep Ethan from returning to class, he wrote him a pass. The meeting ended around 10:52 a.m., and as Ethan stood up to leave, the dean of students, Ejak, handed him his backpack. He commented on how heavy it felt, casually asking what Ethan had inside. Ethan shrugged it off. Ejak didn't have any reason to search the bag, and Ethan's behavior didn't raise any alarms. He showed no nervousness, no signs that anything was wrong. By 12:21 p.m., Jennifer texted Ethan, checking in with him. She told him he could talk to them, reassuring him that they wouldn't judge. About 22 minutes later, Ethan responded with a message of thanks, apologizing for everything. He told his mother he loved her.
They did not know, and I did not tell them what I planned to do, so they are not at fault of what I've done.
Then, at 1:09 p.m., Oxford High School sent out an emergency email to all parents, notifying them of an active shooter situation. James, realizing what was happening, made a frantic call to Jennifer as he raced home. By 1:20 p.m., James had returned home. He hung up the phone and immediately called 911, reporting that his gun was missing and his son was at school.
911, what's the location of your emergency?
I need an officer to come to my house right away, please. I think my son took the gun. I don't know if it's him. I don't know what's going on. I'm really freaking out.
He told the operator about the meeting they had with the counselor earlier, and the terrifying thought struck him that Ethan had taken the gun. Jennifer, now gripped with fear, texted Ethan again, telling him she loved him. When she didn't get a reply, she tried again, asking if he was okay. And then, finally, she sent one last desperate message. Ethan, don't do it. But it was already too late. When detectives searched the Crumbley home later, they discovered the Sig Sauer gun hadn't been stored securely at all. The safe it was supposed to be kept in still had the default code set to 000. The cable lock meant to secure the gun was still in its original packaging. Nothing had been done to keep the gun out of Ethan's hands.
It was hidden in our armoire, in the case, and the bullets were hidden in a completely different spot.
During his sentencing hearing, Ethan confessed to the court, saying he knew he was a bad person. He admitted to doing things no one should ever do, and claimed that no one could have stopped him. He had hidden his plans from everyone, especially his parents. And months later, his mother seemed to agree with that statement.
We are all here because of me today, of what I did. My actions were because of what I chose to do. I could not stop myself, but I am the one who led to why we are here today. I am a really bad person. I have done terrible things that no one should ever do. I have lied, been not trustworthy. I've hurt many people, and that's what I've done, and I'm not denying it, but that's not who I plan on to be.
Ethan's parents weren't the only ones at fault. Jennifer and James may have made grave mistakes, but others shared the blame. The school staff, for instance, had their own failures. Despite red flags, they weren't thoroughly investigated or disciplined. On February 6th, the courtroom grew quiet as the jury reached its decision. The final judgment for Ethan Crumbley came down hard. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His parents, for the role in neglecting the warning signs and failing to secure the gun, were also found guilty of negligence. Both Jennifer and James were sentenced to serve 10 to 15 years in prison. In the end, the consequences of their inaction and the tragedy that unfolded because of it had finally caught up to them.